And our next presenter is Mrs. Reakeeta Smallwood, a proud Calala Murri woman living on Gomeroi Country. Reakeeta is a senior lecturer in nursing, Indigenous and population health at the University of Sydney and has recently completed her doctoral study on historical trauma and resilience, Aboriginal Young Peoples Stories. Thank you.
Gaba, Bulalui, Yama Yamande, Naragi, Narage, Darangay, Gamilaroi, Naram, Yaligamari, Narage, Yaligu Nama, Warigu, Nala, Darawan, Gadigi, Ilidi, Gadigi, Gadabu, Yarada. So thank you. Hello, welcome. My name is Reakeeta Smallwood. That's just acknowledging in my country. It's about reclaiming knowledge that continues to be recaptured, I suppose. And in doing so, I acknowledge the place in which I stand today, which is the proud people of the Anawan people, and acknowledging so I acknowledge ancestors past, present, future, as well as our elders who continue to carry, hold, and cherish us. Bit nervous. Sorry, I'm gonna just breathe. So thank you, Kasani, and for the organising committee, and Uncle Tom Karma, I think you're online. You're the deadliest grandfather I know. I haven't even met you yet, but I think we have. But anyway, thank you for having me here, and thank you everyone for being online and in person. Before I start this story, I just want to acknowledge Uncle Nev Sampson, who's been my elder, not my elder, but our elder for many generations in Tamworth. And when I first started my story around exploring the idea of doing Indigenous research, Uncle Nev took me to this place called Little Wave Rock, which is about 40 minutes on the second mountain of Moore Creek Mountain. And it's a place that kind of, for me, understanding my colonial or being colonised or being part of the colonial system around this tethering of the realness of Indigenous identity, Indigenous country, and who we are as Aboriginal people or Gamilaroi people. And this is very much a tethering space, which I start with and begin with and end with throughout my whole journey through my PhD experience. It was definitely, oh, wow, there is culture here. There is something here to be appreciated, loved, respected, but also accountability-wise. It's the accountability that tethers me and owns me. And it's on the country of my mother's country, who was non-Indigenous, but they lived in Moombi for many generations. There's a name called Coleman Road. And it's kind of that sort of tension point between my Indigenous or Aboriginal, my Gamilaroi life, as well as my recognising the ancestors who also have informed me and continue to hold me, I suppose. What's really significant about, I think, about coming to Anawan Country today is another spot that Uncle Nev takes us to. And you can see Kasani just there looking real deadly. And this is the boundary rock where there's a line between, this is the meeting place between the Gamilaroi and the Anawan nation. It's a place that actually showed us that, you know, it's like over 500 years old, and it was a place that ceremony occurred. So again, finding these places on country that tether us, that hold us, that remind us that there is these stories to be told, stories to be held, and stories to be shared with our young people and to ensure the futurity of our futures. So throughout this work, you'll notice I'm going to share a bit of artwork and I'm going to share a bit of poetry. It's kind of my way of sort of saying to the system of white academia that there's other ways of knowing, there's other ways of thinking, there's other ways of being, and really sort of encapsulating the complexities. The only way I could do that was to try and find some sort of creative outlet, some sort of way of thinking about things more deeply, because often we're so categorized into this. We have to find the answer to the research question. We have to have this process that shows us that we've done it methodologically sound and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, no, actually, there's some things I can't answer. Some things I can't digress, or there's some things that need to be left unspoken, unsaid. Because I might be right now. I might think I'm right now. But I might look at Reakeeta 5 years down and go, well, actually, I've changed because of the relationships that I hold, because of the journey, I suppose, without sounding too, I don't know, the journey. I don't know, it sounds weird now, doesn't it? So I begin with looking at the literature review with a cautionary tale of falling in a trap where we're socialised into the framing, into the issues and statistics, whilst problematising the people. I begin to search through Google Scholar. I go looking for the problem, and I'm confronted with the problematising of Aboriginal young people and their challenges. I get sucked down this rabbit's warren of deficit discourse and find myself comparing Aboriginal young people with non-Aboriginal young people. I forget they have not started the same race as others. I then continue to compare numbers, facts and figures, and the problematising continues. I'm just going to do a little bit of a shift. Initially, I'm stumped, uncertain, falsely reassured. Surely, as it is written, it is true. I start to write, yet I'm paralysed with blankness. I'm in a trap of caution. I pull myself out and liberate oneself, though painful. I come back to my research agenda, and ever so softly, my ancestors remind me to teach hope. And by doing so, we come to a place of self-determination, transformation, decolonisation and healing. This is our ceremony. This is our obligation. This is our agenda. So that literature review that I done was informed by Rigni's Indigenous research principles. And it's got this, I don't know if anyone's heard of these principles before, probably many, but it's looking at these three concepts around of this resistance as emancipatory imperative for Indigenous research. It's around to articulate our stories and recognise our need for self-determination, acknowledging that if we are in control of our destinies, good things happen. Again, and then the second principle is political integrity, politics, the people, the social systems that situate ourselves. But how do we move through these systems? How do we move through these stories? By remaining with this integrity of acknowledging our past, acknowledging our ancestors, our elders, the people we stand on their shoulders. How do we ensure that our agenda, our movement is for our communities, with our communities, by our communities? And then the third one, which was probably the main sort of theme that I kind of carried throughout my whole thesis, was this idea of privileging Indigenous voices. You know, our research must focus on the lives, experiences, ideas, traditions, interests and struggles of our peoples, and centering our research around this, centering it around who we are, what we are, how do we move forward and understand Indigenous research for us, not for the systems that, you know, perpetuate that kind of thing. One of the main findings that came out of my literature review was the importance of elders and elders holding us and caring for us. Elder, I see you. I see you working hard, I do. Elder, I see you. Across time, you weave our people to their culture. You hold them tight. Elder, I see you. You share love and respect. Elder, I see you. You give your time, your energy. You give it all. Elder, I see you. Your feet are firmly planted upon her sacred ground. Elder, I see you. You heal our young people. You cuddle the old and believe for our future. Elder, I see you. You heal our trauma, hold our stories and give us hope. Elder, I see you. What can I repay? Elder, I see you. So this story began over 250 years ago, and we know prior to colonialism, there was 500 distinct Aboriginal nations that were scattered widely across the diverse spaces and places of this continent that we now call Australia. Historical trauma inquiry, which was sort of located within a First Nations context in America and in Canada, offered really valuable insights into the field of health research by taking into consideration the contemporary and historical collective traumas experienced by Aboriginal people because of colonisation. And whilst being well understood in this larger field of inquiry, but to my knowledge, or when I was sort of understanding this journey, there was little to no research, particularly around Indigenous research methods that privileged Indigenous voices about this concept of historical trauma inquiry. Well, what does it mean? I had a lot of tensions engaging in this space because I was really, someone said to me, well, Reakeeta, we've been talking about this stuff for years. Colonisation's always been there. It's always been part of our story of Aboriginal people today. And I was like, well, how do I make sure I hold on to this idea of, I don't want to be part of the problem of problematising Indigenous peoples or Aboriginal peoples. I don't want to be part of the problem that then goes and positions people at risk and vulnerable and non-adherent. And as a nurse, you hear these non-compliant sort of things. I was like, how do I hold on to what this story is about? And it's not about being upset with colonisation. It's acknowledging colonisation's a larger, broader project that began, on the British Isles, expanded across the continents. But it's about this shared experience and understanding the trauma in order to move forward. So I sort of began with these questions. I was like, oh, so what do we understand about it? How do we understand the impact in our families, our communities? And then how do we actually recognise a way through it? How do we move forward? And I put resilience there because I don't know if anyone knows the Indigenous mental health space. Resilience is often this very coined word or used word or very simplified version of, you just bounce back or you just get up and keep going. And so I really wanted to unpack, what does resilience mean from an Indigenous lens, or what does it mean from a story component, or how do we move forward? So my research paradigm is positioned in the Indigenous research paradigm, and I was very strongly about that. I'm not in the qualitative paradigm. I'm not in your critical paradigm. I'm not in that. I'm in an Indigenous research paradigm. I'm in a Gamilaroi research paradigm. And it was definitely informed through Gamilaroi ways of knowing, being, doing, and this ongoing process of critical reflection of my positioning and how then I was positioned within my community, how am I accountable and responsible to the relationships that I hold? How do I do it from a cultural perspective when I'm learning my culture or understanding my culture? Because it's a very diverse concept that, you think you know more than anything, and then you'd be like, I don't know anything. So it's this layering, and it's really sort of being centered around what Karen Martin, Maggie Kovac talks about, is this idea of the cultural and ethical responsibilities held as part of doing relational research and a relational approach to research, and so that we can sort of, understand it from not that negative perspective. And so as you can see there, relationality and country are core. This is, I'm informed from country and country informs me, and the relationships that I have with country. And I mean that with the people, I mean that with the living, the non-living things. And I'll share some, how that's diverse. It's not just country, but it's a whole encompassing term. And then acknowledging that as relational beings, that we're not higher above anyone else. We don't hold any, we're not above, we're all equal as entities, equal entities. And that our connection to health and well-being is reliant on this connectedness. I mean, importantly, I acknowledge that while Gamilaroi worldview is one worldview, but I acknowledge that there's multiple worldviews. There's multiple ways of seeing things. I've got two Aboriginal Gamilaroi people in this room, and their research looks vastly different to what my research looks like. But the construct is, it's relational, it's independent, it's reliant on self and others. And I'll unpack the rest of the slide as we move forward. One of my sort of aha moments was, why is that so like that? I'm just going to get back. How do I make that go away? You guys see that okay? Up this way? Was Balkan Woman's Lenore Gaia research and how she framed this idea of critical murri consciousness. And she talks about it being a complex yet uncomplicated way of thinking. And the complexities arise when we're trying to attempt to describe something that is really hard to think about in a Western conceptual framework. But what she talks about is critical murri consciousness is this idea of, it's not the matter of the mind or how great our brains are or how good we can think about something or hypothesize something, but it's rather the matter of the heart. And the word of the heart describes a symbiosis between the mind, emotion, senses, will, spirit, which we move through temporally. We all have, and it's located on space, time, place, and moving through it as we move through the journey and going, coming back and forward, moving things as we go. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that Indigenous research is not a prescriptive approach. There's no one set way. There's no, yes, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. As much as we would like to put it in a box, there is no box here. But it continually demands us to return to country and all that it entails. Who are we accountable to? Who are we obligated to? How do I nurture and love and give hope to the relationships that I've held? How am I responsible to the young people that gave me their stories for this research? That kind of thing. So my main sort of method was story work as a method. And as we know, Indigenous storytelling has been around for thousands of years. And it was informed by Joanne Archibald, Maggie Kovac, and Minette Benham. And sort of my interpretation of the work or the use of story work was really how then I was related to the story. And then how do I know how I translate my ways of knowing, being, and doing, in ensuring that it's aligned with these four principles of respect, responsibility, reverence, and reciprocity. And importantly, where our temporally, our knowing, our being, it's all placed. It's placed in the context of time, place, and space. And Judy Atkinson, she adopted this approach around Djurali, listening to the stories as an ethical and cultural guide to engage and to transform the research stories. And when I was thinking about Djurali, I was like, that word is not a word that I can see what the practice is, I know what it is. But really what Munro et al. Showed me, which is Simon Munro, Edawan, Gamilaroi men, he actually introduced me to this concept called Winningali. I've already put that in there. Oh, yeah. I'm going to pack that a bit more. So Winningali, which literally means to know, to hear, to remember, and to listen, and to then engaging with that process around how then I could make sense of the stories and move forward. I've already done that. I'm sorry, there's a double up here. Importantly, what Kovacs really talks about is how the Western system has often tried to really subjugate and then discredit our knowledges. It's really, putting it in our knowledge is in this marginalized space of monopolizing of what counts and what doesn't count. And I hear this, I remember this man come up to me one time and he was like, Reakeeta, when you finish your PhD, I'm going to get you to do good science. You're going to do good science when you finish that PhD. And I was like, I've been doing good science all along, but right-o, mate. He's like, I'm going to get you on these RCTs and these. I'm like, no, I'm going away. Bye. See you later. Anyway, and so thinking about what Kovac talks about is this idea of decolonisation and this accountability that we have for the contemporary context of our inquiry. And it's this constant pushing of persisting of the colonial influence on our worldviews. Because often we potentially are at risk of being colonised or being part of the colonising system within itself. I'm going to skip past that. And so really another sort of main construct of my methodology, my methods, was really coming back to what Linda Tuwali Smith wrote back in, was it 2001? I think her first book was published, or 1999, sorry. And she talked about Indigenous research having an agenda. You know, what is our agenda? And it's informed by self-determination being at the center. And then you have these different layers around healing. You know, what does healing look like? Physical, psychological, social, interactive. Is everything okay? Oh, sorry. Am I going so quick? Anyway, we'll move past that. Sorry, Kasani. So I'll just share a bit more about winning. I'll just quickly jump down to my stories, and I should have hurried up. So now, first I'm going to do this. So Winningali is, I think I just find that already. My first hearing of this word was during the Women's Day on Country. Ochre was painted across my face, and as each stripe was placed, a knowledge holder would repeat, Winningali to hear, Winningali to know, Winningali to remember. Through this process, she would ask me to reflect on ways in which I was sure to hear what was being said, listen to what I'd heard, and how I know this throughout life. She placed emphasis on the ways in which I was sure to know what I know through my voice and how this may impact others in time, place, and space. Tensions are held in this space, and voices are threatened to be silenced, and who are most needed to be heard is crucial. And as importantly, guiding this process, like I've talked about, is this ongoing critical reflection, accountability, responsibility in who we are. So what I found as part of, this is you can find this on my publications, that's my methodology. But what I found in understanding historical trauma with the young people's stories was thinking about how they firstly made sense of historical trauma. You know, how do they experience colonization historically, contemporarily? How do they make sense of it? And then how do they define the experiences? The second one was around this idea of identity. Identity is so strong, as we know in the mental health literature. Identity is one of the major protective factors for Indigenous young people, Aboriginal young people. And the varied experience, it's a fluid experience. You might engage in different spaces where you're disrupted or conflicted or questioning or blooming. And then the third one is around recognising resistance and resilience. And what really came out of the research was this concept called survivance, which survivance has two concepts, which is story formation and resistance, being present in the colonial systems, being present in the health systems, you know, providing care for our mob, causing that friction, causing that agitation. And that is, you know, as, you know, resilience is queen to heal, you know, post-traumatic stress or trauma. Survivance is the solution to historical trauma. One more poetry. This was kind of the feeling that I could try to express the unimaginable loss of culture and language and identity. Within you, I'm carried. Within you, I'm here. Within you. Within you, I do not disappear. I linger, waiting near, waiting to appear. Within you, you feel doubt. Within you, you're wanting to shout. Within you, I'm the hurt that you carry, the demon within, the one that holds you account. Within you feel shame, loss, and hurt within you. Yes, is that it? So I've got a lot of stories there. I do apologise for going over. I use art as a way of making sense. This tree has a big story. It lives across the road from my house, and it's about survivance. That's my closing points. Thank you.